This tutorial is a follow-up to the one that I did on Viewport Canvas. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use some tools inside 3ds Max and Photoshop in order to create some of the additional maps that are used on a character. Let's see, to start with, I'm going to come in here and do rendering, render surface map. Render surface map is going to generate some maps. You can see them listed here on the side, some of the types, and they're going to render out based on the topology of your character. So I'm going to hit F4 to show edged faces. And then first thing we do is we want to set our size. So I'm going to just click here in the drop down and select 2048. And so just to show you how this works, you click on your character, click on the button, and then it renders out a map. And so this is an occlusion map. So this is based on the broad flat surfaces get lots of light. The little nooks and crannies get darker because now as much light gets into them. All right, so you can see the head here gets a lot, torso gets some, and in between the fingers is relatively dark. So if I wanted to save this to use for something later, I could come up here to the bitmap window and click on the little save icon, navigate to my folder, and I could save it. I'm just going to call this AO, and I'm going to save it as a PNG file. And these come in handy when creating textures for our characters. I'm just going to click OK for the default here, 24-bit, and that image is saved. So there's other maps in here. The one that I'm going to use that's extremely useful is this pick texture. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be generating maps for our characters. Let me open the material editor. So here with the material editor open, you can see the material I have for my character. I'm going to double click on it here and call this character. And I'm going to open up the rollout for maps. And so you see, here's my material, here's my diffuse texture, right? Viewport Canvas demo _D. That's plugged into diffuse color. In order to change up the surface properties on our character, we can go in and we can adjust the specular level and the glossiness here. And we can see that now the character is a lot shinier. Now, chances are when you're texturing a character or an object, you're not going to want it all to behave exactly the same way. And so instead of just using these base controls here, we can actually use these other maps over on the side. And I'm going to show you how to generate some of those. So let's just set the defaults here back to 0. And so what I'm going to do is show you how to generate some of those. So we're going to start with the specular. And specular helps to have some amount of detail. And that's where those detail maps come in. So previously in tutorials, there's a set of notes, not a tutorial, that talk about creating a tiling detail map. So here's a texture that I have, some galvanized metal, and I'm going to come up to filter, other, offset. And before I do that, let me just double check the size. So this is a 512 image. So half of that would be 256 and half of that would be 128. And so I want to know what the quarter size is. That would be 128, and do filter, other, offset. I'm going to set this to horizontal offset by 128 and a vertical offset at 128 and hit OK. Now for the most part, that tiles pretty well. You can see there's a little bit of a seam, so I'm just going to go here to the healing brush, and then I click Alt to sample an area, and then I can just go over it. And it's different from the clone brush. Clone, if I turn that on, I click Alt, that just paints right on top of it. The healing brush actually works to kind of match colors, which, to be honest, isn't as big an issue here with what we're working on. You see how it makes it a little bit darker there. And so I'm just going to kind of go through and do a pass where some of those seams are. And you can either use the healing brush or you could actually use the clone brush. Either one would work just fine. Now this is a detail map, and so what I'm doing here is really doesn't have to be perfect. I just don't want to see any lines like that really showing up. I'm going to go up here again, say filter, offset again, just to kind of offset it a little bit more. I'm going to look for weird areas and kind of clone those out or heel brush them out depending on which way I want to work. All right. So now I'm gonna save this. I have this saved to my folder. Inside my working folder, I have my PSD diffuse, and I have this metal galvanized. I also have this leather, which I'm going to take and I'm going to do image, edit, oh, sorry, image, adjust, hue, and saturation. And I'm going to remove the I'm going to desaturate this a little bit. And now I'm going to do image, adjust, levels. And I'm just going to make, by bringing the white down, I can kind of increase the contrast here a little bit, which would be good for my, when I'm using this as a detail. So I could save and close that one. And what's the other one I need? I have this wood, which, while not necessarily something I specifically want on my character, this could be useful for me. So I'm going to go in. I did the shortcut Control U for hue saturation. I'm just going to desaturate a little bit. Control L to go into levels and just bring up the light. Okay, there we go. So let's save and close. So Control S to save and Control W to close. All right, and I'll just keep my galvanized metal here. So all right, so now I have my character. I'm going to do pick texture. If I come over here, I can choose. So let's select this metal galvanized and say open. And now what I get to do, the textures here. And if I click texture wrap, what it's going to do, it's going to wrap that texture around my character, and it's going to do it in a seamless fashion. Now there will be a little bit of artifacting where maybe if you have some overlapping pieces on your character, right, that may give you a little bit of an odd behavior. Some of the seams, though, where the actual textures line up with each other should be a lot better. So let's go ahead, we'll save this. And I'm going to call this BCD metal. And I'm going to say this is a PNG file. All right. One way around that would be if I clone this character. I'm going to clone this mesh as a copy. Hide unselected. I'm going to go into Unwrap UVW, open UV editor, and then in Polygon do Select Overlap Polygons. And just right click anywhere and say Convert to Edit Poly. And then Polygon mode, I'm going to go to the front and I'm just going to deselect these guys over here. Oops, actually I want to deselect the ones over on the right because that's positive, and then hit delete. So now if I do my texture wrap, you see I don't get that artifacting on there. So now let's save this one off. Save, yes, okay. All right, so then I could do this with my different maps. I could also, if I want to, tile the texture more. So let's do a different one. I'm going to select the leather and then do texture wrap. And so I may want this, you see how it's kind of warping it to wrap around the character surface? If you can go in and you can say, I'm going to do tile it 2 times and do texture wrap, and now it comes in more detailed. I think this would actually look better. So let's go ahead and we'll close that other one. This one I'm going to save off, right? And I'm just going to BC_D_ leather. Save that again as a PNG file. Close that out. And then let's do one more. We'll create one with this wood. And we'll do texture wrap. Alright, that looks really weird. I think I kind of like that. We can even change that to 3 and do a texture wrap. I like that better though, so let's save that. We'll do same thing, give it a name, something that makes sense. Alright, oops, I want to say this is a PNG file, and save the defaults. Okay, so now I've generated some different surface maps for my character. I can get rid of this one that I rendered with. Get back to this guy. Now, let's turn those actually into something more useful now. Let's open up our texture. Here's my character's main texture. And if I come back in here, I can grab, let's F5 to refresh this. Let's go ahead and get that leather in there. Open with Photoshop. All right, so I'm going to do select all, edit, copy, and then go over and select my texture and then do edit paste. There we go. There's my texture. If I use the magic wand Actually, let's do real quick. I'm going to select my character, and I'm going to go into the sub object here and select everything and do selection to bitmap. And that's going to generate a texture that's just black and white, what I have selected, which is everything. This will actually be very useful to me. So I'll do character, and we'll say this is a PNG. There we go. So now we can come back over in Photoshop, and let's open that up, PNG. There it is, character, open with Photoshop. Alright, there we go. So I'm actually going to go to channels and paste it in there. So now I'm going to do image, adjust, invert. And then if I click on the icon, that makes the selection active, which is all the white. And now I can come out here and just hit backspace. And that'll get rid of all that. Now, we talked in the previous tutorial about fill. So while I have everything selected here, I'm going to do edit, fill with content aware, just to fill in all that negative space there. So we want to get that. There we go. That way we won't end up, that'll help us avoid seam bleed. So now I can utilize some of my, if I wanted to overlay this on, say, the skin of my character, I could come in here and just start working with it, adjusting the blend modes to kind of give him kind of like a, oops, kind of a leathery sort of skin as an option. Right, and so I could take the head and the gloves and move those up separately. I could even take everything here, the main parts of the character, put that in a group and call this skin. And now I could open up another map. So let's get the metal. Open with Photoshop, and then same thing. I'm gonna Control A to select all, Control C to copy, and then I'll come over here and Control V to paste that in, and then same thing. Let's go down here. I'm gonna click Alpha 3, and then hit backspace to clear that, and then do edit, fill with content aware. So it's going to process it, and it takes a little bit because it's a large image, 2048. Control D to deselect, and now I just want to apply this to the area where the head is. So I'm just going to click here where I painted the head, and then come down to this layer and Control J to clone that up, and then I'm just going to turn this off. So I can actually select all these guys and click on the little group here, and I can call this metal, and that's the area where I have the metal now. I have this little metal texture in there. And then let's do, for the last part, let's go ahead and let's put, we'll put that wood on the gloves. Open that up in Photoshop and paste that in here. And let's move the gloves up there, and we'll put both these guys in a group. I'll call this wood. All right, so I got these in, and one final, I actually have the wood is kind of masked out, so I could probably just click here and then Control J, which will clone selection. So let's get rid of that wood. There we go. So now I have different texture types for the different surfaces on my character, and I can also work to blend these. Right now, things like the metal I just kind of dropped in there, so I can actually change that up. Like I could come in and I could set that to be like more of an overlay on top of there. I may not want it showing up on the skin, so what I could do to the skin, if I click on a thumbnail, it makes that selection active. So I could come down here then to where that leather is, and I could do edit, clear, it'll clear that space out. I could do the same thing up here. I'm going to click, hold Control and click in the thumbnail, and that makes that active. So I can come down to the metal, and I can do edit, clear, and then I can come down to, oops, yeah, so I got that on the wood. And so then I can come up here to where this wood is and say, overlay. and kind of overlay that on top of it. So now I have these different textures in here. Now, this is a kind of a silly looking example. I totally give you that, but for the characters you're doing, you'll have more specific types of textures you're going to want to find. So we can save this. When we go into Max, we'll see the textures update on our character. All right, see, he's got his textures on him. Hit P. There we go. So here's my character, and he has his textures. They've been updated. So that's how we go through and we add detail maps to our character. I'm going to save this. I'm going to stop this tutorial here, and I'm going to make a separate one for creating the secondary maps, specular and glossiness.